The diner was quiet except for the soft hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of silverware against plates. It was one of those places where truckers, families, and locals all gathered, a little worn down but full of character. Ava sat at the booth near the window, slowly stirring her coffee. She wasn't really in the mood for it, but it gave her hand something to do. The day had been long, and all she wanted was to eat in peace before heading home. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat her husband, Marcus, but at first glance, no one would suspect they were together. He was in jeans and a simple hoodie, his broad shoulders making the small diner booth feel even smaller. His eyes were calm, but there was something about him, something quiet yet commanding. Most people wouldn't look twice at him, but those who truly paid attention would sense the danger beneath the surface. Ava, on the other hand, stood out. She always had. A proud, curvy black woman with confidence that shone through no matter what. She had never been one to shrink herself for anyone. But tonight, she wasn't looking for trouble. She just wanted to enjoy her meal with her husband, who had finally come home after months away. That's when they walked in. The group of bikers entered with an air of arrogance, their leather jackets marked with symbols Ava didn't recognize, but she didn't need to. She could feel the shift in the air. The way people tensed up, how conversations dropped just a little lower. These men were used to taking up space, making sure everyone knew they were in charge. At first, she ignored them. She had seen men like this before, loud, cocky, full of themselves. It wasn't worth the energy. But the moment she felt their eyes on her, the moment she heard the first muttered comment, she knew this was different. Didn't know they let elephants dine indoors. One of them sneered under his breath, just loud enough for his buddies to chuckle. Ava froze, gripping her coffee mug a little tighter. She wasn't new to this. The sideways glances, the whispered remarks, the outright stares. It was nothing she hadn't faced before. But that didn't mean it didn't sting. Marcus didn't react. Not yet. The bikers took a booth nearby, continuing their conversation like they hadn't just disrespected someone right in front of them. But Ava knew their type. They were waiting to see if she'd shrink, if she'd keep her head down and pretend she didn't hear. She wouldn't. With a steady breath, she turned slightly, her voice calm but firm. "You got something to say to me? Say it to my face." That got their attention. One of the bikers, a tall, grizzled man with a thick beard, laughed and leaned back in his seat. "Feisty one, huh?" he said. "Guess I shouldn't be surprised. You people always got an attitude." The air in the diner grew heavier. A few customers looked away, pretending not to hear, while others watched cautiously, unsure of what would happen next. Ava kept her gaze steady. She wasn't going to let them intimidate her. But she wasn't stupid either. She knew men like this thrived on pushing limits, testing boundaries just to see how far they could go. Marcus, still silent, set his coffee down. His movements were slow, deliberate. The kind that signaled something most people in this diner were too unaware to catch. The biker sure didn't. "You out here alone, sweetheart?" Another one asked, his tone mocking. His eyes flickered to Marcus, but he barely spared him a second glance. Just another regular guy, nothing special. Ava felt the tension in her husband's posture, the quiet way he observed every movement, every breath. She knew him well enough to recognize the shift. They had no idea who they were talking to. Marcus had spent years in the Marines. Not just any Marine. He was the kind of man whispered about in military circles, the kind whose presence alone could send a warning without a word being spoken. He had seen combat in places most people couldn't even name. He had taken down threats before they even knew they were in danger. And right now, these men, they were making a mistake. The leader of the group smirked, mistaking Ava's silence for hesitation. "Didn't mean to upset you, sweetheart. Just making conversation." Ava didn't flinch. "Yeah? Then why don't you try having one without the insults?" The biker's smirk faltered for just a second before he chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, you got a mouth on you." He turned to Marcus, finally giving him some attention. "That your girl?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and set it down again before speaking. His voice was calm. Too calm. "She's my wife." Silence. A few of the bikers exchanged glances, as if just now realizing the situation was different than they assumed. The leader scoffed. "Damn, didn't take you for the type." Marcus still didn't react. He simply looked at the man, his expression unreadable. Ava knew that look, the kind of look that meant a storm was coming. And these men had no idea they were standing right in the middle of it. The leader of the bikers leaned back in his seat, studying Marcus with an expression caught somewhere between amusement and mild irritation. The way Marcus sat there, calm, unbothered, like he hadn't just been disrespected, seemed to confuse him. Guys like him were used to getting a reaction. Fear, anger, anything, but Marcus gave him nothing. Ava could tell that annoyed him. "You got yourself a real bold one," the man said, gesturing lazily toward her. "Guess that's the kind you go for, huh?" Marcus didn't even blink. He just sat there, one hand resting on the table, the other casually wrapped around his coffee cup. His expression remained unreadable, but Ava could feel the tension building under the surface. She had seen this side of him before, the stillness, the way he observed everything without giving anything away. Most people didn't understand it. They mistook it for passiveness. But she knew better. She had seen what happened when that calm finally broke. The biker didn't know it yet, but he was playing a dangerous game. Ava could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to look away. She had dealt with ignorance before. She had grown up learning how to handle it, how to protect herself, how to walk the fine line between standing her ground and keeping herself safe. But this was different. This wasn't just about some words thrown her way. It was about the way the entire room had shifted. The way the other customers were either too afraid or too indifferent to speak up. The way these men carried themselves like they owned the space, like they had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. And that was the part that made her chest tighten with something between frustration and exhaustion. Because she knew exactly how this could go. The wrong word, the wrong look, and things could spiral. And yet, she also knew she couldn't just sit there and take it. Not because she was looking for trouble. Not because she wanted to fight. But because silence had never been her style. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around her fork as she took a slow, deep breath. "You done yet?" she asked, her voice steady. "Or do you need to keep talking to feel important?" The man's smirk faltered. He clearly hadn't expected that. His buddies chuckled, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that meant they found it funny. It was the kind that meant they were waiting to see how he'd react. Ava could see it in his eyes. The flicker of irritation. The shift in his posture. Marcus still hadn't moved. Hadn't said a word beyond what he already had. But Ava could feel him. She could feel the way his presence had settled over the table like a quiet storm. The biker scoffed, shaking his head. "Man," he muttered, looking around as if searching for someone to back him up. "This what you deal with every day?" he asked Marcus. Mouthy, stubborn. "Watch yourself." The words weren't loud. They weren't even sharp, but they carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. For the first time, Marcus looked up fully, locking eyes with the man. And just like that, the entire dynamic shifted. The biker's grin faded, replaced with something else. Something uncertain. He had been treating Marcus like an afterthought, like just another regular guy sitting in a booth. But now he was actually seeing him. Ava had to stop herself from smiling. She had seen this moment happen so many times before. The moment people realized they had completely miscalculated. The biker's brows pulled together slightly, as if his instincts were trying to tell him something his brain hadn't quite caught up with yet. He glanced at his friends, looking for the same confidence they had walked in with. But now, there was hesitation. "Hey, relax, man." Another one of them finally spoke, tried to sound casual. "No need to get all worked up." Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence did the work for him. The leader of the group shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable now. He wasn't sure why, but he knew something was off. Ava had to fight the urge to say something snarky. Part of her wanted to let them keep digging their own hole, but she also knew this wasn't the time for that. Instead, she let the quiet stretch. And then, like cowards always do when they realize they aren't in control, the biker laughed, shaking his head like the whole thing wasn't worth his time. "Whatever," he muttered, leaning back. "Ain't even that serious." No one responded. The tension in the air didn't disappear, but it shifted. The men weren't so sure of themselves anymore. And Ava could tell they were trying to figure out the best way to back down without losing face. A few more seconds of silence. Then, just like that, The group decided they were finished with their meal. They threw some bills on the table, muttered a few things to each other, and left. The door swung shut behind them. Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus still hadn't moved. His expression hadn't changed. But now that the bikers were gone, he slowly picked up his coffee again and took another sip, as if nothing had happened. Ava stared at him for a long moment before finally speaking. "You didn't say much." He glanced at her. "Didn't need to." She sighed, shaking her head with a small smile. "You and your quiet intimidation." Marcus smirked, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He set his coffee down and leaned in slightly. "They were one step away from making a very bad decision," he said, his voice low. Ava studied him. "You don't think they're done, do you?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the window, where he could see the faint glow of taillights disappearing down the road. Then, he looked back at her. "No," he said simply. And for the first time that night, a small chill ran down Ava's spine. Ava felt the weight of Marcus's words settle in her chest. She knew him well enough to understand that when he said something like that, he wasn't just making a guess. He was certain. She glanced toward the window, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. The bikers were gone, but something told her this wasn't over. Men like that didn't take embarrassment lightly, and Marcus had just made them feel weak without lifting a finger. That kind of thing didn't sit well with people who thrived on intimidation. Still, she forced herself to relax. The last thing she wanted was to ruin what was supposed to be a peaceful night. Marcus had just come home. She had spent weeks waiting for this, counting down the days until he'd be back at her side. She wasn't about to let a bunch of cowards take that away from her. She picked up her fork and took another bite of her food, even though her appetite had faded. "Well," she said, keeping her voice light, "if they come back looking for trouble, I hope they're ready for a lesson." Marcus gave her a small, knowing smile. "Oh, they won't be ready." They finished their meal without another word about it, but the unspoken tension lingered. When they finally stepped outside, the night air was cool against Ava's skin. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few cars scattered under the dim glow of the streetlights. Marcus scanned the area the way he always did, his sharp eyes moving over every detail, every shadow. It was a habit he couldn't break, no matter how much time passed. Ava knew better than to question it. She climbed into the passenger seat as Marcus slid behind the wheel. The engine rumbled to life, but before he pulled out, he reached into the center console, his fingers brushing against something. Ava didn't have to look to know what it was. His old Marine-issued knife, the one he carried like a part of himself. She sighed. "You really think they'll be dumb enough to follow us?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he eased the truck onto the road, his grip firm but relaxed on the wheel. "I think," he said finally, "that some men don't know when to quit." The drive home was quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick with anticipation. Ava tried to shake it off, to focus on the familiar scenery passing by. The small town lights faded into dark stretches of road, the trees casting long shadows under the moonlight. But she couldn't ignore the feeling creeping up her spine. Marcus was right. This wasn't over. By the time they pulled into their driveway, the tension in her chest had settled into something heavier. Their house sat at the edge of town, tucked away just enough to offer privacy, but not complete isolation. Normally, she loved the quiet of it. Tonight, though, the stillness felt different. Marcus parked, cut the engine, and sat still for a moment. Ava watched him, taking in the way his jaw tensed, the way his fingers flexed slightly against the wheel. He was listening, waiting. Then, slowly, he exhaled and reached for the door handle. "Let's go inside." Ava didn't argue. Inside, the house was just as they had left it. Warm, familiar. But the second the door shut behind them, Marcus locked it, his movements smooth and practiced. Then, without a word, he pulled back the curtain just enough to glance outside. Ava folded her arms. "Marcus." He didn't look away from the window. "They were watching us." Her stomach clenched. "You saw them?" "Didn't have to." He let the curtain fall back into place. "I felt it." Ava swallowed, trying to push down the unease building inside her. She had always trusted Marcus's instincts. He had never been wrong before. But that didn't mean she wanted to accept what this meant. She dropped onto the couch, rubbing a hand over her face. So what do we do? Marcus turned to face her, his expression calm but unreadable. We wait. She frowned. That's it? For now. Ava hated that answer, but she knew it was the right one. If those bikers were stupid enough to come looking for trouble, Marcus would be ready. But deep down, she hoped they'd just let it go. She had seen enough violence in the world to know that nothing good ever came from it. Still, the night stretched on, thick with uncertainty. Marcus didn't go to bed right away. Instead, he sat near the window, quiet and watchful. Ava tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't settle. Every noise outside made her tense. Every creak in the house sent a jolt of awareness through her. She didn't know how long she lay there before exhaustion finally pulled her under. But when she woke in the middle of the night, Marcus was still there. And she knew, without a doubt, that this wasn't over. Not even close. The night stretched on in thick, suffocating silence. Ava lay in bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, but sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured the way those bikers had looked at her, the way their leader had sized her up, like he was just waiting for an excuse. And then she thought about Marcus, how still he had been, how measured. She turned her head slightly, glancing toward the window where Marcus sat, unmoving. His silhouette was carved against the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. He hadn't spoken in a while, hadn't made a sound, but Ava could feel the energy rolling off him. He was waiting. She swallowed hard. Marcus, she whispered. His head turned slightly. Yeah. She hesitated. You think they'll come here? A long pause. Then, in that same calm, steady voice, he said, I think they want to. Ava pushed herself up, wrapping her arms around her knees. You think they'll actually be dumb enough to try? Marcus exhaled slowly. People like that, they don't let things go. And after what happened at the diner, they're probably feeling stupid, angry. He turned to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Angry men do stupid things. Ava felt a chill crawl up her spine. The wind howled softly outside, rustling the trees, making the house creak. She tried to tell herself that it was just her nerves playing tricks on her, but something in the air felt different. Charged. Then Marcus shifted. His posture straightened, muscles tensing. Ava's breath caught. What? He held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. He listened. Ava barely breathed. She strained her ears, heart pounding. And then there it was. A sound. A low rumble. Faint but unmistakable. Engines. She felt her stomach drop. Marcus stood, his movements controlled, deliberate. He didn't panic. He never did. But she could see it now. The sharp focus in his eyes. The way his body moved like he was stepping into a familiar rhythm. A side of him she didn't often see, but always knew was there. Ava scrambled out of bed, gripping the edge of the dresser. How many? She whispered. Marcus stepped to the window, lifting the curtain just enough to see. 3 bikes. Maybe 4. Slow. Ava's pulse hammered against her ribs. They weren't just passing by. Marcus let the curtain drop. He turned back to her, jaw set. Stay inside, he said firmly. Her heart clenched. Marcus, stay. Inside. His voice was low, but left no room for argument. Ava wanted to fight him on it, to tell him she could handle herself, but deep down, she knew he was right. This wasn't the time for pride. Marcus grabbed his phone, checking the signal. No calls going out, he muttered. Ava's stomach twisted. They cut the service? Or jammed it? He slipped the phone into his pocket. Doesn't matter. Ava took a shaky breath, her mind racing. She had always known Marcus was capable of things most people couldn't imagine. He had never talked much about his time in the Marines, but she had picked up pieces over the years. She knew he had seen combat, had been in situations most men wouldn't have survived. And she knew, without a doubt, that those men outside had no idea what they were walking into. The low rumble of the engines grew louder. Then they cut off. Silence. Ava's skin prickled. Marcus moved toward the front door, his steps silent. He reached for the handle, then paused. A beat passed. Then, a sharp knock. Ava swallowed hard. Marcus glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without hesitation, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. The leader of the bikers stood on the porch, flanked by two others. His smirk was back, but this time it looked forced. He was trying to act like he was in control. "Nice place," the man drawled, rocking back on his heels. "Real cozy." Marcus didn't answer. The man's smirk faltered slightly. He cleared his throat, tilting his head. "Look, man, we got off on the wrong foot earlier. Just a misunderstanding, you know? No hard feelings." Ava's fists clenched at her sides. She knew a lie when she heard one. Marcus stayed silent, just watching. The man shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, we don't want any trouble. But see, the thing is," he rubbed the back of his neck, then let out a breath. "Respect's a funny thing. Can't let a man make us look bad in front of our own people. You understand, right?" Ava felt her nails dig into her palms. Marcus finally spoke. "You should leave." The man blinked. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, you really think?" Marcus stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to make the man instinctively step back. It was subtle, but it was everything. Ava saw it in their faces. The slight flicker of doubt. The realization that Marcus wasn't afraid of them. That maybe, just maybe, they were the ones in danger. The leader swallowed. His fingers twitched slightly at his side. "We just want to have a conversation." Marcus's voice was steady. "You had your conversation." A long, tense pause. Then, the leader's smirk disappeared completely. His expression darkened. "I don't think you understand." A branch snapped. Marcus's eyes flicked past him, scanning the darkness. Ava saw it too. Movement. In the trees. They hadn't come alone. Her breath caught in her throat as a shadow shifted beyond the porch light. Marcus's stance changed. And in that moment, Ava realized something. These men had come here thinking they were the hunters, thinking they had control, but they had just walked into a battlefield, and they had no idea who they were up against. Ava's pulse pounded in her ears as the air around them thickened with unspoken tension. The bikers had come expecting a fight, but they weren't prepared for the man standing in front of them. Marcus wasn't just a strong man protecting his home. He was something else entirely. A soldier, a strategist, a predator who had spent years mastering the art of survival. The leader's bravado was starting to crack. His fingers twitched at his sides, his weight shifting ever so slightly like he was rethinking everything. But then, from the shadows, another voice cut through the silence. "Let's not drag this out." Ava's stomach turned to ice. The voice didn't belong to any of the men on the porch. It came from beyond them, from the darkness where the trees swallowed the yard. She strained her eyes, trying to see, but the figure remained just out of reach of the light. Marcus didn't react. He simply stood there, waiting, calculating. The leader of the bikers, who had been teetering between arrogance and uncertainty, suddenly found his confidence again. He straightened, glancing toward the shadowy figure before giving Marcus a smug look. "You see," the leader said, tilting his head, "I didn't just bring my boys. I brought someone special." Ava's grip tightened on the edge of the couch, her nails digging into the fabric. The figure stepped forward, and when the porch light finally hit his face, Ava felt the breath leave her lungs. He wasn't just another biker. He wasn't some random thug backing up his friend. He was military. Everything about him screamed it. The way he carried himself, the controlled movements, the calculating expression. He was older than Marcus, maybe mid-40s, but still built like he had never left the battlefield. Scars lined his arms and neck, a history written in his skin. The leader of the bikers smirked. "I figured, why not even the odds?" Ava's stomach twisted. This was bad. Marcus remained perfectly still, his face unreadable, but she knew him too well. The moment this man stepped forward, something had changed. The man studied Marcus for a moment, his gaze sharp. Then he smirked. "Been a long time, Shepard." Ava's breath hitched. That name. She had heard it before, but only in hushed tones, in whispers among the few Marines who had served with Marcus. Shepard wasn't just a nickname. It was a ghost, a legend. Marcus said nothing, but something dark passed over his face. The man chuckled. "Guess you don't recognize me." He spread his arms. "But I remember you." He tilted his head. You left a lot of people real mad when you disappeared. Some of them never got over it. Ava felt the room tilt slightly. What was he talking about? Marcus hadn't just disappeared. He had finished his service. He had come home, hadn't he? The leader of the bikers, clearly enjoying himself now, clapped his hands together. See, Marcus, I had no idea who you were when we met earlier. But my friend here? He jerked his thumb toward the soldier. He recognized you. Said you weren't just some guy. Said you were dangerous. He grinned. I don't like dangerous men messing with my business. Marcus exhaled slowly. You don't know what you're doing. The biker scoffed. Oh, I think I do. The soldier beside him shook his head. No, he muttered. You really don't. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the leader's face. What? The soldier didn't answer. He was still watching Marcus, his expression unreadable. Ava's chest tightened. Whoever this man was, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't here for intimidation or some petty revenge. He had a different reason for coming, and that terrified her. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Then the soldier finally spoke. You should have left him alone, he said, his voice quiet. The leader frowned. What are you talking about? The soldier sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You don't pick fights with men like Shepard. Because when it starts, it doesn't stop. The words sent a shiver down Ava's spine. Marcus remained still, but now she saw it. The slight shift in his stance, the way his fingers curled just slightly. He was waiting. The soldier's gaze flickered to Ava. He studied her for a moment, and something in his expression softened. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. The leader scoffed. Man, you're acting like he's some kind of monster. The soldier didn't look away from Marcus. No, his jaw tightened. He's worse. Ava's heart nearly stopped. The leader finally seemed to sense that something was wrong. He turned toward the soldier, his brows furrowing. Wait, are you? The sound of gravel crunching made them all freeze. Ava's pulse jumped as more figures emerged from the shadows. Not bikers. Not gang members. Soldiers. Men who moved with the same sharp awareness as Marcus. Men who had come for a reason. The leader of the bikers took a step back, his confidence crumbling. What the hell is this? He snapped. The soldier beside him finally turned to face him fully. And when he spoke, his voice was calm, almost pitying. This isn't your fight anymore. Ava's breath caught, because suddenly it all made sense. This wasn't about a bar fight. It wasn't about bruised egos. This was about Marcus, and the past he had never spoken about. The bikers had no idea. But Ava did. This wasn't just some old military buddy coming back to haunt Marcus. This was a warning, and whatever was coming next, it was only just beginning. The air was electric with tension, every breath heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Ava stood frozen, watching as the reality of the situation finally sank into the biker leader's face. He had walked into something much bigger than a simple street fight. He had dragged himself and his men into a battlefield without realizing it. The soldier standing beside him, Marcus's ghost from the past, watched everything unfold with eerie calm. He wasn't here to back up the bikers. He wasn't even really here for a fight. He had come for Marcus, and that meant something far more dangerous was at play. Marcus took a slow step forward, his focus locked onto the soldier, not the bikers. Say what you came to say. The soldier exhaled, almost like he wished this moment could have been avoided. He glanced at Ava again, something almost like regret in his eyes. Then he turned back to Marcus. They want you back. Ava felt the words cut through the air like a blade. The biker leader snapped his head toward the soldier, confusion clouding his face. What? What the hell does that mean? The soldier ignored him. They know where you are. They know you've been living quiet, staying out of the way. He let out a slow breath. They're not going to let you? Ava felt her stomach tighten. Who's they? She asked before she could stop herself. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but the flicker of something dark in his expression was enough. The soldier finally turned toward the bikers, looking at them as if he had just remembered they were even there. You should leave. While you still can. The leader bristled. Like how we're leaving. You think I'm just going to walk away after? Marcus moved. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't fast in a wild, uncontrolled way. He was precise, deliberate, a force of nature that hit before his enemies even realized they were under attack. The biker leader barely had time to flinch before Marcus grabbed him by the front of his jacket, twisting him around and using his own weight against him. In seconds, he was on the ground, coughing as the air was forced from his lungs. The other bikers moved, but Marcus was already ahead of them. He struck calculated and controlled, disarming one before he could even pull his weapon, forcing another to stumble back in shock. Ava barely had time to react before it was over. The leader lay groaning on the ground. His men stood frozen, their confidence shattered. The soldier didn't move. Marcus turned to him, his breathing steady. "I'm not going back." The soldier didn't flinch. "You don't have a choice." A long silence. Then Marcus said something that made Ava's blood run cold. "I never did." The soldier sighed like he had expected that answer. "Then you know what comes next." Ava's heart pounded. Whatever this was, whatever Marcus had been running from, it wasn't over. Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. But in his eyes, she saw it. The unspoken truth. This wasn't just about tonight. It never had been. The real fight was just beginning. Ava felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet, like everything she thought she knew had been ripped away in an instant. She looked at Marcus, searching his face for answers, for reassurance, for something that would tell her this wasn't as bad as it seemed. But what she saw instead was a man who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The bikers were no longer a threat. They had come expecting an easy fight, but they had walked straight into something far beyond their understanding. The leader groaned on the ground, coughing as he pushed himself up onto his elbows. His men stood frozen, unsure whether to run or try to salvage what little pride they had left. The soldier, the man who had known Marcus from a life he had never spoken about, didn't look surprised. He only nodded, as if Marcus's reaction had confirmed something he already knew. "You always were a fighter," the soldier said, his voice calm. "But you know this doesn't end here." Marcus didn't flinch. "It does for them." He nodded toward the bikers. "Tell them to walk away while they still can." The soldier turned to the leader, who was still catching his breath. "You heard him." The leader's face twisted with anger, but there was no more fight left in him. He knew he had lost. He scrambled to his feet, throwing a glare at Marcus before looking at the soldier. "You're siding with him?" The soldier didn't answer. The leader let out a frustrated breath and turned to his men. "We're done here." One by one, they backed away, their bravado completely shattered. Within minutes, they were gone, their motorcycles roaring to life as they sped off into the night. The silence that followed felt heavier than the fight itself. Ava exhaled, but the tension in her chest didn't ease. The real problem was still standing in front of them. The soldier crossed his arms, studying Marcus. "They'll send others." Marcus nodded. "I know." Ava swallowed hard. "Who are they?" Marcus finally turned to her, and for the first time, he looked tired. "People who don't let go." The soldier sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You left a mess behind. They don't like loose ends." Ava's heart clenched. "What do they want?" The soldier hesitated. "Him, or proof he's not a problem." A chill ran through her. "And if they don't get either?" The soldier didn't answer. He didn't need to. Marcus clenched his jaw. "I'm not going back." The soldier studied him for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "Then disappear." Ava's stomach dropped. "What?" The soldier glanced at her. "You don't get it. If he stays here, they'll keep coming. And next time, it won't just be some punks trying to prove a point." He looked at Marcus again. "You know I'm right." Marcus didn't argue. He knew it too. Ava felt her chest tighten. "No," she shook her head. "No, we have a life here." "We have." Marcus reached for her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers gently, grounding her. "I won't let anything happen to you." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something final. She gripped his hand tighter. "Then we fight?" The soldier huffed a quiet laugh. "You're not listening. You don't fight these people. You either work for them, or you disappear." Marcus exhaled, looking out into the dark, as if he was already thinking 5 steps ahead. "I won't let them drag me back." The soldier nodded. "Then I'll do what I can to slow them down." "But you don't have much time." Ava's pulse pounded in her ears. This was really happening. The soldier stepped back, looking at Marcus one last time. "For what it's worth, I never wanted it to end like this." Marcus nodded. Neither did I. Without another word, the soldier turned and disappeared into the night, leaving them standing in the quiet. Ava's throat tightened. What do we do? Marcus squeezed her hand. Pack a bag. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Where will we go? He looked at her, and for the first time that night he smiled. Somewhere they'll never find us? She wanted to believe that. She had to, because no matter where they went, as long as they were together, they would find a way.